Hello. A few people online and offline have commented about my outdoor punch bag and exercise stand, and I thought I'd talk about it for a little while, about how I made it, how easy it would be for you to make one, and the advantages of doing so. Have a better look at it from further away, and here goes. As I mentioned before, when I used to train in Shotokan Karate, I hadn't used a bag, and that was after quite a few years, and a couple of different clubs, many different locations for those two clubs. Even when I trained in Kung Fu for a little while, as we used to call it then, not Wing Chun, there were no bags involved, just pads sometimes, and it was only when I started training in Muay Thai in 2007 that I began to use a bag. I wanted a bag before. I had a bag. I bought a bag when I first moved out of home about 94, maybe a little bit before that, but a lot of the time it's difficult to put them in the wall. It was more difficult back then to get the equipment to hang them with, and I just never put it up. Didn't have one. I wouldn't be without one now. It would be an awful thing. It's definitely the centre of my exercise. When I started training in Muay Thai, I actually wanted to mount one on the wall at home, and I sought advice about how strong the wall was, and I asked my Muay Thai instructor if he thought an indoor wall in a fairly old house would take a punch bag stand, and he told me he uses the washing machine stand, the washing line stand outside. In the UK you've got a lot of older houses that have a concrete post just about 6 foot high, very tough, and he used to hang his from that. Of course it didn't swing a lot, but you could hang it on one side and it worked. And I thought about doing similar, and driving past a lumber yard just a couple of miles that way down the road, and they were advertising railway sleepers, and I thought, well, that sounds pretty good, one of those, put that in the ground and hang it from that. Turned out when I got in there they didn't seem to have them anymore, but what they did have was these 10mm by 10 centimetre by 10 centimetre wooden posts, 10 foot and 7 foot, and I bought a few of those and decided to see what I could do. First of all, I had this, a little bit like a gallows pole, very simple, and it worked. Could have kept on using that if I wanted to, but once I found out how easy it was to pull a couple of these things in the ground, I wasn't going to stop very soon, and it did wobble a little bit, laterally. Next we had this incarnation of it with an added upright and an extra horizontal, and of course it was a little bit stronger and there were more places to hang things from. And that did me for a little while, and then another year or so later I decided to add 2 more uprights and another horizontal, and now I've got this, and you can do a lot with it. It's good for pull-ups. Just pull a bar on it. You don't need to buy a pull-up bar, depending on what you've got lying around. You can use a standard lifting bar. You can clamber on it. I've got tyres on it. I could do dips if I wanted to. Up here, where you've got a few 40mm horizontals, at just above 90 kilos, it would be a little risky. I'd have to do it near the ends, and if I was really going to do it often, I considered this, I would put another 40mm beam beneath each one, screwed into it to strengthen it. One of the good things is you can do what you want with it, very versatile, and you can improvise as much as you want to. Why would you want to do this rather than buy one? These days I find there aren't that many options if you want to buy a multi-station punch bag stand. Just having a look in the last couple of days, I found you've got this, not too bad, just over £160, but it's not tall enough, would not take a 6 foot bag, and I assure you that would rock around quite a bit. The speedball station is very low. Doesn't mean it's of no use, but it's not optimal. You've got to have a bit of space indoors for it, and you might have a room just for training in. I don't. Wouldn't be impossible to have one, but it would require quite a lot of inconvenience. I like being outside. My shed wouldn't take a very tall one. I used to have a punch bag stand in it, It's now lying in the corner somewhere unused. I may use it again one day. Most of all, this is too short and it's not going to be all that sturdy, and you can't do that much with it. So I say that's not so good, even though it's not that expensive. Now, next you've got things like this, £1,600. I think that would have cost a little less before prices started going up like crazy over the last few years. It's pretty good. I think if I remember reading correctly, it's 12 foot. This is only 10 foot. You've got to have a place to put it. If you have it outdoors, then I think it will start to rust in a few years. You could probably still use it for a very long time, but do you want to pay £1,600 for something that's going to sit and rust in the garden? I think you probably don't. Of course, when you have a professional gym, they'll have a number of those and they have lots of bags hanging all over the place. And if you've got that sort of space, then that's great, but not a lot of people have. One advantage with this is it could be taken down if necessary, but should we decide to sell this house and move somewhere else, you take off some of the fittings and it's just a funny looking pergola. Hang some plants from it, and most people would be happy to have that in their garden. There's not a lot of alternatives, and as we already see, this one is rather too expensive in my opinion. So cost can be a problem, and how long they will last. This went up first. It was certainly up in 2015, so it's at least 10 years old. It might be just a bit older for the first bits that went up, and it's certainly durable. You'll see when I pull a hard kick or punch in, the whole thing moves a little. I think it's quite good that the long uprights absorb some of that, and the whole top moves in unison because it's glued together pretty tightly and screwed together pretty tightly. But it means it's not putting all the shock into the ground and loosening in the ground. It's absorbing some of it in the wood itself, which I think is quite helpful. And you won't get that with steel. As for making it, it's a very easy matter. Each of these uprights only goes about 2 foot into the ground, and that doesn't seem like a great deal. It's less than with a brick wall, for example, where you want to have roughly 25% of it in the ground. But it's certainly been enough over a long period of time. For the slightly higher vertical there, it's probably only about 20 inches in the ground, but it works. You need to use concrete, of course. You could use a bit of sand, a bit of cement and a bit of gravel, but I think it's much easier to just buy fencing post mix. And I've approximated prices for some of these things. I looked on Amazon, £20 for a 20 kilo bag. That's ridiculous. You can get some cheap ones for more like £6.99. You can easily expect to get it for no more than £10 for a bag. And once again, this has been up for 10 years and it's fine. Maybe it's not quite intended for that intense a task, but it's working perfectly well. I do have one advantage here. I don't think people in America would have this sort of thing, probably not in most of Europe, because it seems that we get a raw deal in England a lot of the time. And one way in which we get a raw deal historically is with houses and gardens. Not a lot of space, and with houses built in the era this one was built in the 1950s, they used to tear apart anything they had to, anything that was there beforehand, and dump it in the garden. And our house was bombed during the war and rebuilt in the 1950s, and everything that was left of the old house was dumped in this garden. So you don't have to dig more than about 6 inches to find bits of brick and all kinds of things, sometimes concrete where old paths were. The point is, when you dig a hole, it's really hard to do it, but it's going to be really secure, and anything you stick into the concrete isn't going to move very far. If you have good sandy soil, then you might want to use more than one bag of the post mix. It depends. If I was making one that I want to be up for 10 years and I had sandy soft soil, I would probably use 2 bags. I'd probably want to use cement and pebbles as well as sand to really make a heavy base. But that's not often going to be what you need to do, I don't think. I don't think many gardens in England have that good quality soil. Let's look at the prices of the wood. Now, I believe I remember when I was buying this that each of these 10-foot ones were £10 and the 7-foot ones were £8. And quickly estimating, I think it cost me less than £150 to make this, but everything's gone up in price. So here I've got an estimate based on things you can get on Amazon now. Here's some 10 centimetre by 10 centimetre wooden beams. They're only 8 foot. I'm sure you can get 10-foot ones somewhere. I'm sure if you look around for a bit you'd find them, but just for the sake of argument here, you could cut them so you've got extensions to put on and make it a little bit higher, and then you've also got horizontals left. So out of these 10 pieces of wood we get enough uprights. You wouldn't have something quite the same as this. It would be rectangular with 2 uprights and about 8 foot long. You can hang bags on there, you can do plenty with it. You could do just about anything you could do here, although if you wanted to add to it, to put a pull-up bar on, you could, and I would. I like this design. But here is an estimate of the cost, including the 20 centimetre, I believe, screws. And the good thing about those, rather than really heavy duty bolts, is you can use an ordinary drill. You have to get a 20 centimetre drill bit, drill your holes. You'll need a spanner to get those screws in once you start getting down far enough. They're pretty tough. On each top, where a horizontal crosses the vertical, I used 4 screws and 100 millilitres perhaps. No, more like 50 millilitres of wood glue. Maybe that's a little bit too much still, but they haven't come apart, and I don't kick it full force all the time, but it gets pretty hard punches. It moves the whole thing, and nothing is coming to pieces, and it's all very stable still. Easy matter to build. I think you could put it up, the rectangular kind I'm talking about, I think you'd do it in 16 hours. If you really pushed, you might do it in 8 hours. This one, similarly, I think 16 hours would do it. Of course, you need some 40mm by 40mm bits to support it where you can. I've done it there using them horizontally on the main beam. This bag's been here for ages, and there might be a slight bend in that wood, but that's it. I wouldn't hang the heavy 6-foot one here. That's partly because I like the ball and to be able to move around it, but I would worry a little bit about it taking the weight. Probably don't have to too much. Of course, it means that you one side only when you're kicking. You can't come around here to kick in particular, but a lot of gyms have punch bags up against the wall. If I wanted to, I could take the uppercut bag, much lighter, soft as anything in fact, and hang that here, or the torso bag. And having all these bags around just demonstrates how I find it's really good to encourage you to do different things. So when you're training specifically for combat, you probably want to be a bit more careful about what you do. You have particular routines you go through with the idea that the opponent's doing a certain thing. Here, when you just want to take it easy, you can just be at the bag a little bit, come and relax at the ball. As I mentioned before, I sometimes rely on this when I've been hitting the heavy bag a bit too much. I come and hit the ball and it's resting. But then you could argue it's just as good as moving and keeping your guard up in a fight. And back to versatility. If you're having a day when you don't have a plan, you just do some exercise anyway, I find this encourages me to do different things. And here, for example, I probably mentioned it before, it's great for hooks and uppercuts. It's pretty cold today, so you want gloves on if you're going to do a lot of that. I do hit it without gloves on, but you've got to be careful. Perfect positioning only. It just encourages you to do more different things because you're surrounded by more different things that encourage you to move in a different way. And you go between them, so you've got ball, bag, ball, bag, and here, much slower ball, again, moving differently. I wouldn't usually use a ball that slow, but it's something different to do. You can get the ball out there when it's moving and move in to the ball more than you can with this. It's back so quickly you can't really pursue it. I wouldn't really have all these things up this often. In fact, mostly I just use the heavy bag and the FC ball, and that's it. The tyres are always there, of course. Always got the pull-up bar there. I think that's really all I wanted to say about it. You can do other things. Here's tennis ball on a bit of bungee, and I find this is good. Probably mentioned it before. It's just for a stretch. You're not going to punch anyone. Hopefully you won't be in a position where you need to punch somebody who's that much taller than you. I find my elbow just about reaches it. So, no, not that time. No, not that time either. Maybe I'm getting a little bit shorter. I think actually I had it the other way round once with a longer bungee up there, so it was just a bit lower. No, I can't elbow that at the moment, but even trying gives you a bit of a stretch. Let me think. One more thing to remember if you're making one is at the base of the uprights. I didn't know this to start with, so later on I added raised concrete here in a little mound. If you don't, unless you've got a very even, well drained patio, then water will stay at the foot of the wood and it will start to rot pretty quickly. In fact, I've got a bit of wood down here where I once put balls here, tied at both ends, and that's rotting. It was sometimes in inches of water. I drilled holes for drainage, have to replace that piece of wood, but the rest of it is all fine. No shaking, no rotting, no bending, except for a little bit here. And if you look at the outer there next to the uppercut bag, that has a bend in it, but it was like that when it came. That's the way it was laying on the pallet, and that makes me think of something to be aware of. This one turns flat here, it goes through about 10 degrees here, and that made it hard to get this on. So if you go into a lumber yard and they've got a pallet full of 10 centimetre by 10 centimetre beams, you might want to point at the ones you want to take and don't let them give you any of them without consideration for that. I think that's it. I don't think there's a way to have such a versatile, complete punch bag stand anywhere near as cheaply. This is the basis of all my exercise really, apart from lifting. Well, then again I do the pull-ups here. I wouldn't be without it. Why don't you build one? I think you should. And one thing people might say is, well, I don't want to train outside. Well, if you don't want to, if you really don't want to, can't do much to change that. I love it. It's raining now. I love training in the rain. In fact, I love training even when it's raining this much. And that's it. As I say, a few people have asked about it. Some people say online, nice setup. Had people visit the house lots who say that's really great. Some people who do train in martial arts. One person lived locally. He said he was going to build one, but he never got around to it. That's a shame. But then he was somebody who trained in martial arts in speech, and I didn't see him do it very much. I saw him have the odd guest, and he used to, more than anything, hold the old big briefcase for kicking and do a little of that with them. Didn't see him training him much, although when he told you about it, he spent a lot of time in Thailand training in Muay Thai for 8 hours a day. I once asked him to do a gauntlet with me, something I'll be filming soon. Best thing for fitness, I think. It's a little bit like CrossFit, but more interesting in my opinion, and less conducive to boasting, perhaps. Anyway, he didn't want to do it. He had a lot of excuses. Right then, that's it. Purely practical video, this one. Hope you're doing okay. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.